It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the tweet of the day comes from Rick Wilson. The Rick Wilson said, "Stop asking if 1930s Germany can happen here. It's happening here." And look, he's absolutely right. And it's been happening for a while. Not surprising. And I blame our media. I've been saying this for a long time. I know it's easy, a cheap shot, but I blame our corporate controlled media for, doing this whole both sides thingism, always being, we've got to tell the other side. For instance, Washington Post, we talked about this yesterday, still reporting that the fraud trial, still reporting that it's alleged. No, the judge said he's guilty of fraud. That's the reality. There was a summary judgment. The bench trial, it happened. It's no longer alleged. Stop. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the both sidesism. And are we living? Is it happening? Is 1930s Germany happening right before our very eyes? That's why I've asked my good friend Will Bunch to come talk with us. Will is a national columnist over at the Philadelphia Inquirer. He's also the author of the fabulous book After the Ivory Tower Falls: How College Broke the American Dream and Blew Up Our Politics and How to Fix It. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick. Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So this frame, people have been talking about for a little bit about this both sidesism. You've got the Republicans saying one thing, you got Democrats saying another. One side's telling something close to reality, one just kind of making stuff up, not even close to reality, but yet got to report them as their equal.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a crazy example of that just in the last couple days with this total meltdown that's happening up on Capitol Hill, right? And you get these mainstream papers like the Washington Post and the New York Times writing pieces that basically say, why is Congress so dysfunctional, or why can't Congress pass a budget bill, or McCarthy gets ousted, and it's like Congress is totally broken. It's like, no, I mean, Congress isn't broken. I mean, the Democrats in Congress seem to be doing just fine. It's one party that's totally broken. Yep. And all these things that we're talking about, they're also interrelated. This dysfunctional Congress, which is totally the fault of Republicans. That's one of the things that's enabling this brand of fascism that we're seeing now, because they want to gin up cynicism, right? They want voters to think the system is so badly broken that that only a strong man can fix it. Yeah. That democracy. This is what they say, that democracy is not working anymore. So we need to try something else.
Will, I've been saying for years, Republicans run on government shouldn't do anything, can't do anything, government's broken. And then when they get in there, they set out to break it. Now they've just completely broken it. I think they've gone a bit too far in breaking things to where I'm hoping, and maybe you'll agree or disagree, I'm hoping the American people are paying attention, because we are absolutely in uncharted waters right now. This has not happened before in our country, and a lot of firsts seem to be happening with Republican leadership right now. And I'm hoping voters are paying attention, because we're 13 months away from the next election.
Yeah, I'm actually working on a column right now. It's not going to be published until tomorrow, unfortunately, but it really touches on a lot of the things that we're talking about here. And this is fascinating. And so far, only The Guardian, which not enough Americans probably read, it's a very good publication, but only The Guardian has done a story about this. But, these far-right think tanks, I know that's kind of an oxymoron to talk about the far right and thinking, right? But, these groups like the Claremont Institute and Hillsdale College, which are, these groups that have been created to to come up with this kind of pseudo intellectual heft behind, Trumpism and the authoritarian drift of the Republican Party. They in the last like 6 months or so, these pseudo intellectuals on the right have been writing pieces saying that America needs what they call a red Caesar. I guess red being for Republican, right? A Caesar, that like in ancient Rome, to argue that democracy is not working and we need somebody to come in and assume dictatorial powers, and it's like, oh, just temporarily, just to get the Marxists or whatever they're calling people these days out of the deep state, just to break down the influence of all these liberals who've taken over these agencies and these systems, and that's their plan, I mean, they have this blueprint called Project 2025. I don't know if you guys have talked about it.
Yeah, the Heritage Foundation.
On the show. Yeah, and it's basically to end civil service.
It's to bring back patronage, is what it is.
Yeah, and put Trumpists in every over EPA and the NLRB and any other important agency that you can think of, but destroy them. It's one thing. This isn't Ronald Reagan putting Gorsuch's mom in the EPA and siding with polluters. This is destroying the EPA. This is like breaking these agencies beyond recognition.
But here's the thing, and we've talked about this, over the last several years. Right now, ALEC is celebrating its 50th anniversary. None of this stuff is new. The Heritage Foundation is over 50 years old. They created this massive state policy network of think tanks or stink tanks or whatever you want to call them. In every state, they've got chaos merchants coming up with their own alternative reality, their own alternative facts. And as I've been saying here, Republicans right now are lying differently. They're lying much differently than past generations because they're creating their own reality out of these groups that you're talking about. All of these state policy networks, all of the folks that you talked about, they're creating out of whole cloth. They're just pulling stuff out of whichever orifice they can grab it out of. And that now becomes the talking point. Whereas in the past, at least there were decent, honest people on that side of the aisle who said, no, that's too far. Now it seems like they're all on board.
Yeah. I mean, Mitt Romney, who was the last arguably of one of those type people, is, it's like he's had enough. I mean, the last few people who maybe, John McCain is long gone, and I'm not huge fans of those people and their politics, but you're right. At least there was a level of honesty. I think it's interesting. I was thinking when you were saying about how a lot of these practices have been going on for some time, and it's just like it seems like it's getting worse. I mean, I think you're right, and I think what's happened though is I think that starting going back to the 60s, when the culture wars really kicked off, and also when you had the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, and you had you had Title IX empowering women, right? You had all of these things, and the initial reaction is we can beat this through politics, right? They had Ronald Reagan, who was a master politician, and they were able to win elections. They won the '88 election with the Willie Horton ad and these other scare tactics against Black people, and it was ugly and it was horrible, but they could win elections. And as since 1988, Republicans have lost the popular vote in seven out of the last 8 presidential elections.
Because their policies are bad. This is important. Their policies are horrible. The American people realize that their pro-corporate, pro-rich people, anti-worker agenda is horrible for the mass of the people. So yes, they're going to lose the popular vote, which is why they've had to go full on, alternative reality, alternative facts, fear, scare, and shame people.
Yeah, I mean, what this movement is, what conservatism in this country is all about is preserving the hierarchies, right? Preserving the hierarchy of, white supremacy or white privilege or whatever you want to call it, preserving the patriarchy, where men are dominant. And they're going to do that, to borrow a phrase from Malcolm X, they're going to do that by any means necessary, right? And if elections can't do it, they're going to find some other way. And they went from winning elections with Willie Horton type ads to voter suppression, voter ID laws, things to suppress the vote, and now even that's not enough. So that's why you see, if we can somehow get Trump in there in 2025, we're just going to throw it all out. We're just going to make him become a red Caesar, have him seize, they won't call it dictatorial powers. I don't know what they're going to call it, but that's what it's going to be. It's going to be dictatorial powers. And just real quickly, this is why what you were initially talking about, the both sides problem in the media, this is why that is so important, because that reality is not coming across to the average voter, I don't think.
No, because
it's coming across to some people. There's more, like that Rick Wilson tweet that you quoted at the beginning. You're hearing more discourse like that, right? You're hearing more people saying, no, this is really like 1930s fascism was in Europe.
Well, what I was going to say is, you have this want of authoritarianism by folks on the right. I look at that story coming out of Staten Island of all those people in Staten Island, doing all kinds of outrageous stuff to people who have been moved there from Texas or Florida or wherever, playing music at all hours of the night, harassing the refugees and all of this stuff, just being horrible human beings.
It's horrible. I've just noticed. I've just seen really recently, like in the last few months, just a huge uptick in this type of behavior. And let me give you another example. We had a guy who was a freelance journalist and kind of an activist here in Philadelphia, a guy named Josh Kruger, who was formerly homeless, overcame drug addiction, and he wrote about these issues, and he was a real kind of civic mensch, civic asset. And, he was murdered this week. And, a lot of us who knew him, I knew him on social media mainly, but those of us who knew him, posted, were shocked, what a loss. And these posts on social media were flooded with haters saying, good riddance, one less journalist, thank God this guy was killed. And that happened. Apparently a liberal activist was murdered in a street crime up in New York City a few days ago, and the same thing happened, where you've got these like swarms of online fascists, basically, and I don't, maybe some of them are coming from Russia or somewhere else, maybe they're not even all Americans, but and the Staten Island thing, I was just reading about that today. It's another side of that same coin. It's just this ugliness out there. And
see, I've been saying for a while, social media has allowed people to be the worst versions of themselves. And I think Trump and the Republican Party have because online is one thing, but out in public is another, and dealing with each other is another. And I think Trump and the Republican Party have given people I'm not going to say the permission, but have allowed the idea that you can be the worst version of yourself, not just online, but to people's face. And this is where I fear that this tension is going to continue to rise to a point where possibly there may be violence at some point down the road.
Yeah. Well, remember when Trump first came on the scene, when he ran the first time in 2015 and 2016, and all those people at his rallies saying, I love this guy, he tells it like it is. And it's like, well, no, he was just saying the racism and xenophobia and other things that they wanted to say. Yeah. And he was saying it, and at some point it's like, yeah, if he's saying it, then we can say it too, and I think you've seen this devolve, over the last 8 years. And
I look at Twitter. Twitter's become a cesspool.
And and Elon Musk, the owner, for whatever reason, is enabling this. And
I think he bought. I said the day he bought it. He has bought Twitter to destroy it. And look, there was just an article out the other day that has proved me right. He's going from the playbook that was given to him when he bought Twitter to destroy it, because you can't have a platform where people actually get news and information. And I'm sure you saw today that they're ending the headlines on articles that are being shared, because I guess they don't ever want you to leave that cesspool of a platform.
Yeah, which takes away one of the original things that people really liked about Twitter back in the pre-Elon Musk era, which was, going on there to find out what was going on. People would post links to articles that you hadn't seen, and it still works sometimes. That whole Red Caesar thing in the Guardian, I wouldn't have seen that if somebody hadn't linked to it on Twitter, right? So, but they're trying to take that away, and it is amazing, and it's like, I mean, is it really that simple that it's just that Elon Musk is this billionaire who doesn't want to get taxed, doesn't want a government that is anti-billionaire, anti-wealth, and he's willing to, he realized that Twitter was a threat to that, right? If Twitter operated the way it could operate.
Yeah. Last question I've got for you, because we're in this situation. The media, I think, was a big part of getting us here. This whole both sidesism thing, and I love the one statement I saw. Should the media give equal weight to both sides, even when one of them is lying? And the fact that someone would even ask that question is just incredible to me. But that's kind of the world we're in. So if they got us into this, do you have any hope that they get us out?
I don't know. The people who are running the big organizations, the New York Times and the Washington Post, which are so influential, both have fairly recent new editors, and they both, and the Wall Street Journal, I believe, also, which I think was the editor of the Wall Street Journal who made that comment that you were just quoting. And these people are all new, and they are all wedded to the both sides philosophy. And I've been in journalism for I lost track, well over 40 years, 42 or 43 years now, and so I know the mentality, and I understand where it comes from, and it was born in a different era. And when I was a young journalist, I bought into it, I applauded it, and then I saw things that actually happened in the real world, like the bogus Iraq War in 2003, for example, and I came to realize that the flaws of both sides journalism, that it doesn't work, and the situation we're in now is a 5-alarm situation, because journalism and democracy are just intertwined. You can't be a journalist and be neutral about democracy, because we see around the world in the more established dictatorships, we see what happens to journalists. We see, look at what happens to journalists. Look at Vladimir Putin's Russia, where journalists, if they're not banned, they're being tossed out of windows, right? So you can't be neutral about that. And I don't think the public is getting enough information about the anti-democratic threat that we're facing right now.
I'm right there with you.
I don't.
Will, I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff. Keep up the great work. I hope folks will check out the book, also the column. We'll get links out on social media how folks can do that. But Will, I appreciate the time.
Yeah, Rick, thanks for having me. I appreciate it as well. Good to talk to you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Will Bunch. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. The talk.
Hey, this is Ken Casey from the Dropkick Murphys, and you're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
The old factory towns in America's heartland have been taking a beating. Thing is, though, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. The new CHIPS bill that got passed will bring jobs back home and has already resulted in big announcements of major new factories opening. The American Recovery Package has allowed cities and counties to hire new police officers and firefighters and start rebuilding their communities again. We're finally turning things around after 40 years of screwing over working people. But will we keep moving in the right direction? That's our choice.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and DC government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
It doesn't matter what kind of weather. It doesn't matter what time of day or night. When Mother Nature's done her worst, the only thing that matters to us is keeping the lights on for you. The hardworking women and men of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, dedicated to keeping the power on in communities all across the country. Because when bad weather strikes, we know what matters most. IBEW, the power professionals.
Again, I go back to the frame. Republicans lie differently today. You know, back in the old days, there was at least a kernel of truth. Now, well, they're just, as Kellyanne Conway said, they've got their alternative facts. You know which orifice they pulled those out of. Let's go to the phone lines. We got Steve on line 1 from Chicago. Steve, how are you?
Yes, I'm fine, and I wanted to chime in on the discussion you were having with the previous guest. I caught the tail end of that, and when it comes to looking at the scholarship on why societies disintegrate, we actually find that it's because of distrust in the courts, distrust in terms of lawmakers, distrust in terms of journalism. All of the institutions that you rely upon in a democracy, a functional democracy, when those cease to function, a society can disintegrate. And that's why it's essential that we have these institutions and that they are functional. And unfortunately, trust, when you ask Americans, it's at record lows when it comes to media. It's at record lows when it comes to the legislature and also the presidency. Now, obviously, Donald Trump contributed to that with regard to the executive office. Low trust in terms of the House and the Senate. Well, that's been something that's been going on for a couple of decades. But now we've introduced a dangerous third element, and that is the extremely low trust that exists in the highest court in the land. Because there was a time in America when pretty much we could rely on the high court to be an objective arbiter of what goes on in our democracy. But no longer. Now the feeling among many Americans is that basically it's just another element in the lawmaking process that can be bought and sold by the wealthy. And that's a problem. Again, if we want this society to survive in terms of its function as a constitutional republic, those institutions need to be maintained and strengthened. And this idea that we can just simply sit by and watch as they deteriorate without any impact is just naive.
Yeah. What do you make of the argument that Will was making about, that the right is possibly going to be pushing for a red Caesar, an authoritarian to come in and say, I can fix, Donald Trump say, I can fix all of those problems. Because you're right, Congress is, I think syphilis had a higher approval rating than Congress. As you said, the Supreme Court's struggling, the executive branch is struggling, all of this stuff. What do you make of that? Do you think that's something Americans would tolerate?
Well, like a lot of people, I thought, with the Cold War having come to an end, the book, The End of History, basically articulated what a lot of us thought. That, the last great conflict had been resolved, and that liberal Western democracy was the order of the day moving forward. And this idea of, a strongman rule and the desire to see someone like a Stalin or a Hitler or other sorts of figures such as this, that was something that we had outgrown. Well, the human beings are now more sophisticated. Now it turns out that we're not. There are some of us that are, but there are other people who just want to be led by the nose. and are willing to listen to whomever tells them what they want to hear. And that's what Donald Trump did in 2016. He basically told a bunch of people who didn't know any better that, yeah, I'll get you back your grandfather's coal mining job, as if somebody actually wanted that or that was possible. Hillary Clinton refused to tell the lie, but Donald Trump decided to lie to people as if that was something that could happen, given the fact that those jobs are not overseas, as he claimed. They're taken over by automation,
right.
And so they're not coming back. And when people don't care about facts, they just care about the savior. So in the same way that Adolf Hitler promised to save Germany, Donald Trump took it from his playbook and other fascist playbooks.
Yep. You're spot on, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, these are the people who are to blame. They don't look like you. They have different religions. Their complexion is different. And
I agree.
Let me save us.
Gotta go. Steve, appreciate the thoughts. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Q Cells has been like the first around here that focuses on clean energy. For millennials, not a lot of us want to be jumping around job to job trying to figure out what we want to do. But in clean energy, we see a sense of job security and longevity, something that we're going to be able to do for a long time. It's important for Congress to invest in clean energy infrastructure because it sends a positive message to smaller communities like Dalton. It'll provide jobs for those that are struggling to meet their financial needs.
Before we close the program, we want to take a moment to thank our viewers and to share a little bit about why we do what we do. At The Rick Smith Show, we believe that media today is almost entirely controlled by corporate greed. So we have now 24-hour news channels. But instead of 24 hours of news, what we get is 1 hour repeated 24 times, and with tons of commercials creating obscene amounts of profits. Information once presented as a public service has now become a private commodity. So when lies make money, lies are what we get. We get a corporate-controlled rage machine feeding us anger and hate, trying to convince us that our problems are right-left or red-blue, when they are and always have been up-down, the wealthiest 1% versus the rest of us. Our goal is to be an alternative to that machine, not as a news show with a fancy journalist out front, but as a talk show run by a union truck driver and a team of working-class heroes just like you. Everything we do, both what we get right and what we get wrong, is dedicated to advancing the interests of America's working families. No corporate ad buys, no think tanks, no focus groups, no talking points. We are media by working people, for working people. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.